Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamans.
Still a deficit budget. We're still going to borrow as much as up to 7-9 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby. So the first thing that is done is for the...
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring back Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, it's another beautiful day. Every day presents new opportunities, and another opportunity has presented itself for us to look at issues related to business, finance, global issue, and the economy. This is Early Exchange, and I am Femi Ayodele. As you know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development. That's the focus of this program. When it comes to Early Exchange, that's what we do best, to shape policy and advance development with our conversation. Today, we'll be looking at the Trade and Investment Summit that happened in Lagos yesterday, the highlights of that event, some of the issues being raised by the facilitators and some of the keynote speakers. We're also going to look at the latest developments as regards the exit of the trio of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso from ECOWAS. We're going to give you this latest development, and this will be the thrust of our conversation today. Don't forget, you can be part of this conversation. It's your program. You know, just go on our social media platform, on our YouTube page, to share your view, to hear your comments, and let your voice be heard. Blessing is here to also lend our voice and also make today's program worthwhile. How are you today?
I'm well. Good morning, Femi.
Good morning.
Thank God it's Friday.
Yeah, TGIF.
And good enough, we're talking about trade and investment today. So that means that after today's show, a lot of persons will have insight into the areas for investment and how they can better do trade. So they'll have also the weekend to think on it and strategize, and maybe by Monday, some investments will be happening nationwide and across Africa. That's our hope for you today, as we ask that you stay with us for the rest of the show. Let's get over now to the news studio and bring you up to speed on the latest happenings across the globe.
Hello and welcome to News Update on Souq News. I am Grace Komolafe. In a bid to cultivate a new breed of educators equipped with the necessary skills of the digital age and supports the implementation of smart education in Nigeria, the Nigerian government has initiated a teacher internship scheme, TEAS, introduced by the Universal Basic Education Commission, UBEC. The scheme will address the shortage of teachers in the field of smart education, aligning with the UBEC's establishment of 37 smart schools nationwide. During the launch at the UBEC Digital Resource Center in Kado, Abuja, Nigeria's Minister of Education, Professor Tahir Maman, noted that the scheme is designed as a hub for resource creation, distribution, and personnel training, stressing government's commitment to shifting from traditional teaching methods to meet the demands of a technology-driven era. Moving on, Nigeria Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Henneken Lukbiri, has confirmed ongoing negotiations to resolve the long-standing dispute surrounding OML 245 with the aim of resuming production in the national interest. Similarly, Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu directed the Attorney General of the Federation, Lateef Fagbemi, along with the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources and various government agencies, to clear all court cases related to the $1.3 billion deep-water OML 245 oil block in the southern Niger Delta. The Malabo OML 245 deal, originally acquired in 1998, has been mired in controversies with allegations of bribery and corruption. Lukubiri emphasized the urgent need to boost investment in the oil sector to prevent an impending economic crisis. And away from that, the recent passed consumption tax by Brazil's Congress has been described as a groundbreaking consumption tax overhaul. President Lula celebrated the achievement, highlighting its potential to simplify Brazil's excessive complicated tax system, which uniquely allows all three government levels to levy consumption taxes. The reform, according to the Congress, aims to replace 5 main consumption taxes with 2 VAT rates administered by the federal government and a committee representing states and municipalities. The streamlined approach seeks to end cumulative taxes, automated input credits, and charge taxes based on the purchase location. While the reform promises significant improvement, challenges persist, including lobbying efforts for continued exemptions and special tax regimes. In another story, New Zealand government has announced a 2% increase in the adult minimum wage, raising it to $23.15 per hour starting April 1. Currently set at $22.70 per hour, this adjustment aims to strike a balance between safeguarding the incomes of low-paid workers and maintaining a labor market conducive to employment. According to Workplace Relations and Safety Minister Brooke Van Velden, the economic landscape, marked by high net migration rates, constrained consumer spending, and subdued economic growth, influenced this cautious approach. While a cabinet paper suggested a 1.3% increase, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment recommended 4%. The increase is expected to impact between 80,000 and 145,000 workers, with training and starting wages remaining at 80% of the adult minimum wage rate, reaching $18.52. Retailers expressed relief at the 2% increment. And lastly, Zoom Video Communications International says it is set to trim its workforce by approximately 2%, following reports from the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. The job reductions will be conducted on a divisional basis, as disclosed by an insider yesterday. A spokesperson for the company emphasized the routine evaluation of teams to align with strategic objectives. According to them, the workforce adjustment involves reshaping roles to enhance capabilities and ongoing recruitment in major areas for the future, notably artificial intelligence. This move followed Zoom's announcement last year outlining plans to cut around 1,300 employees, constituting roughly 15% of its total staff. And that's it on News Update this morning. We return to Femi Ayodele and Blessing Eiche as Early Exchange continues.
All right, Grace, thank you so much for the news update. Now it's time for us to look at the highlights of the Trade and Investment Summit, the African Trade and Investment Summit that happened in Lagos yesterday. It was organized by the popular newspaper platform Business Day. We're going to look at some of the issues being raised by the keynote speakers, which has to do with the issue of tax policy in Nigeria. To help us review this, we have been joined by our in-house analyst. We have Dr. Idauza Osamanze here with us this morning. Glad to have you join us on Early Exchange as usual.
Femi, I'm honored to be here.
Good morning.
Good morning, Blessing.
As always, your outfit has set the pace for the weekend.
Oh my God.
So TGIF.
It's looking Owambe-ish.
Yes. All right. Now, the African Trade and Investment Summit that happened in Lagos yesterday was graced by the VIPs, you know, the stakeholders, CEOs in the business community and across the nation. You had someone like Taiwo Idele as one of the keynote speakers, and he raised some critical issues. In fact, let me give you the mind-blowing revelation from Taiwo. Taiwo said that Nigerians they pay over 200 unofficial taxes. The official taxes are 60. The unofficial, they are 200. Let's start our conversation with that. How do you react to that kind of revelation?
Well, for me, it's not anything new. I don't see it as any new revelation because it's known to us. And we have not stopped emphasizing that in this studio. The fact that you have a very powerful non-state actors who are taking revenue on behalf of the government. And somehow, these are not unknown to the government. If you just take Lagos, for example, and like every other major city in Nigeria, and you see these people who are collecting revenue crudely, whether in the market, whether they're on the road, and the citizens are helpless. And sometimes these are done even in the front of police stations, where government law enforcement officers are. These people are so powerful that government can't even regulate them. And so they are all across the places. So I was saying recently in one of our trainings, and I said, you see, we should stop the idea that Nigerians don't pay tax. The better narrative is that the taxes does not come to the government. So the tax goes into private pockets, in the motor parks, in the market unions, and association. Even the one who regulates those who ride Okada and Keke here in Lagos, they all take revenue from these people. For every single passenger that is taken from every bus stop to bus stop, somebody is there to take the revenue. So this may not be going into the government coffers. And so that's the reality we find ourselves, because government has failed and we have not been able to actually regulate or enforce laws within our domain. Now, if you go to the land side, you see land speculators. Here in Lagos, you call them Omonile. Now, you see development agencies and unions all across Nigeria. They are all taking revenue from people. But this does not get to the coffers of government. And I think that's where a lot of revenue is actually frittering away. Now, imagine that all these collections that are done daily, from Lagos to Ibadan, to Akure, to Edo, to Onitsha, all comes into the coffers of government. We will not be talking about the level of infrastructure decay that Nigeria suffers at the moment.
All right, at the summit yesterday, Taiwo Idili was talking about 81% of Nigerians being unemployed. And he went further to say that the reason why Nigeria's unemployment rates has come down, like the UK, it should actually translate in development, but it's still rated as one of the poorest countries in the world. So he talked about people being employed in areas that are not productive. Now, how can that narrative be changed? Can everybody be a manufacturer or be in other sectors as expected by Taiwo Idili? What exactly does that mean?
Well, I don't know what data that Taiwo is relying on to say that Nigerian employment rate and unemployment rate is equal to that of the UK. You see, except that we want to factor in armed robbers, kidnappers as employed. Now, if there are people who are basically employed, because we don't even have the data to determine who is employed and who is not employed. So it will be foolhardy for us to say that we are at the same rate of unemployment with the UK. Because UK have their data. They know the people who come into UK every day, and they know who does what, where people work. We don't know that about Nigeria. Now, if you take just a sample look at Lagos, for example, and walk around the street in the middle of the day, and you see people who are sitting down, some of them are drinking, doing nothing. You can find that in the UK. So how do we account for these people? And this is all across the major cities in Nigeria. I travel a lot and I see this, where you are seeing army of young people, able-bodied people, not doing anything. We have a lot of people who are carrying applications from one place to the other, young school leavers, and they are not working. So we cannot say that our employment is 4.4% as that of the UK. And so I disagree greatly with that, because we don't have statistics to really determine that. And if Nigeria must know what exactly their unemployment rate is, we must first and foremost ensure that we document every Nigerian and know where they live, where they work, or where they don't work. So that had to be done. Now, but on the fact that 81% of most Nigerians who are working in a productive sector is also a fact that one cannot dispute. You were in the FRC training, and you remember that one of the greater issues that we're talking about is that everybody who came out for that meeting, the emphasis is always that we are talking revenue, because they were wondering that why will government want to take 50% of their revenue and or 100% of their revenue, and government is not minding what they are doing. And we're saying, look, it's not just about revenue, it's how much do you really generate? Because most of the people who are actually in employment are working for government. And those who work for government, they don't produce anything, whether they are indirect or direct goods. So there's no productivity that's happening around that level. That was why yesterday I was still emphasizing here that, look, government need to weed down on the size of its workforce, who are actually not adding value to society. So to that extent, it's understandable that the only productivity that comes from this set of people is the fact that we take tax from their income. But there's no economic activities that they are doing, apart from few agencies of government, that really is involved in active production. So this is where we find ourselves as a nation, and that is what is actually responsible for our inability to mop up revenue. Because if you have a lot of productive activity going on, agencies of government who are creating wealth, who are empowering the economy, we will not be where we are at the moment.
All right, before we call for the track up of the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Tax Reform, which is Taiwo Edele, let's still look at this fact that if 60 are officially approved, 60 taxes officially are approved, and then you have more than 200, being the system, what does it suggest about our system, and how did we find ourselves in this kind of situation whereby we don't have control over our tax policy, our tax system in Nigeria? What does it suggest about this system and the need to reform them?
When you look at the 2021 Fragility Index in Africa, what you see is that Nigeria is ranked in the first 5 states in Africa that is fragile. Now, what is Fragility Index measuring? The Fragility Index is measuring the inability of a government to actually be in control of the system. So what you're seeing here is the fact that government is not in control. And that's why I keep saying the increasing role and power of non-state actors in Nigeria, people who are bigger than government. That's what we're talking about. And so they are the one who oppresses the people, maybe by means of violence. And you need to go see the crude measure that these people are using in enforcing revenue collection, whether it's in the market, whether it's on the streets or on the major roads. You see them everywhere. And this is because the state itself, by its nature of its politics, has over-empowered people who are not within the state. Because this is one of the issues, and this is a conversation that we must have. And I was very happy that Taiwo spoke to this issue of appealing to our politicians is not just in terms of writing policies. It is also appealing to our politicians to stop empowering individuals who are not state actors with weapons and with money to overpower the state. Because most of the crises that we are dealing with, if we must be fair and sincere to ourselves, are all generated by our politicians. Some years ago, my friend, who is a DSS, there was going to be an election in Edo State, and he told me almost all the hotels in Edo were booked, locked down. Who were there? Members of various secret courts, who politicians have mobilized to help them drive the election process. This is what we see on a daily basis. So when you see a lot of arms and ammunitions flying into the country, politicians are using this to ensure that they get access to power. That's why the struggle for power here is so intense and it's involved a lot of killings. We must not shy away from this fact, and the politicians, they know it, that they are the ones who are empowering these people. Because when you give people guns to help you do elections, and after the election, what happened? Do you recover the guns? What do you think these people will be doing with the gun after? These have been since 1999, and we cannot run away from this fact. So the real basic problem is that we are having politicians who are so desperate in taking power, and they will go any length to get access to power, including the use of force. They take gun and want people not to come out to vote so that their party can win. So all these are in the known, and Nigeria knows it. But the unfortunate thing is that sometimes you also see even the security agencies, and that's why you see all the elections reports from 1999 till date, whether they are the main elections or the all-circle elections, security agencies have consistently been indicted, even in this role. Because if you cannot beat them, what do? You join them. So this is a narrative, this is a trajectory. We find ourselves as a nation that the state does not have the authority to actually control everybody or enforce compliance with basic rules and regulations. So this is why we are here. And if we have to turn this tide, then the state must take its proper place. And we can say today in Lagos, we don't want those boys running around vehicles in Lagos State. But what are you going to see if you arrest them today? Tomorrow politicians go and take them off because they need them to win the next election. This is the tragedy, and this is what Africa needs to deal with. In short, Nigeria needs to deal with. I don't think it's so much like that in other countries of Africa. It's more Nigeria.
All right, talking about what Africa needs. At the summit yesterday, one of the things that were pointed out was the issue of infrastructure deficits in Africa. And according to some of the keynote speakers, its positions, it makes Africa to be at a disadvantaged position. Is there a possibility of this narrative changing quickly?
Of course, the end is not in sight. And I think that is why what Taiwo said yesterday also was fundamental, which is the philosophy of the president that's actually driving the committee. And that is, we don't need to tax our seed. That was a very deep philosophical statement, that we don't need to tax our seed, that we need only to tax our fruits. And he made the example of Enormongs, who in 2021 alone paid about $11 billion as his personal income tax to the United States of American government. And he said, using the 460 Naira exchange rate to a dollar, he puts it together and he discovered that what Elon Musk alone paid in 1 year, all the personal income tax in Nigeria put together in 4 years was not equal to it. So this is to tell you, and that was why he was emphasizing the fact that government must find a way, and the civil society must also assist in driving this process so that we don't keep taxing our seed. We should allow business to thrive. Except you have not attempted a business, you will see how tax officials are driving you. They are not even really concerned about whether you're making profit, whether you're selling or not. All they just want is to take revenue from you. And if this become approach, this will make the businesses in Africa less competitive. And I think that's the real issue here. So he was emphasizing that we need to create that ecosystem where Africa, or indeed Nigeria, can become headquarters to big businesses. And then they make money, and then we spend it here. I made that illustration here yesterday also, using the island. All the big companies in the world are having their headquarters in Europe, in Ireland. Why? Because it's a tax haven. And corporate tax is just about 11% in the island. And therefore, you don't want to put your headquarters in Germany, where they are paying for 3%. So you put it in Ireland and you save more money. Because the goal of every businessman is to make profit. And as a matter of fact, maximize that profit. So we have a huge issue. Augusto did a survey some years ago to put the deficit in our infrastructure at between 100 and 150 billion US dollars to be spent over a period of 30 years to be able to meet the gap of the infrastructure needs for Nigeria alone. I'm not talking Africa, just Nigeria. So you can imagine that if you multiply that 100 billion in a year for 30 years, you know what that is. So that is what Nigeria needs to be able to meet up its infrastructure need. That's huge. Currently, the entire budget of 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024 is not up to 100 billion. So how are we going to bridge that gap? Where will that money come from? And this is why, for me, the emphasis really, yes, there was so much mention about the manufacturing yesterday. And I don't think that's where the emphasis should be. Because even manufacturing companies are folding up and having difficulty in business everywhere across the globe. It's not just Nigeria. So where is the soft money coming from? We are in a knowledge-driven economy. So the power of the mind is far bigger than the power of the factory. And that's why, for me, really, if Nigeria has to make a significant drive, when we're talking about reimagining growth for Africa, where emphasis must be is knowledge-based economy. Look at it, we're talking about Elon Musk, who is paying 11 billion of tax to America without having a shop anywhere. So this is what we're talking about. It's the power of the mind. Look at Facebook. Look at Google. All these businesses that are driving the economy of the globe as we speak has nothing to do with size of building or size of factory. It's just the ability of people to conceptualize things, be creative and innovative, and this will bring about. And how are we going to get to this level is the fact that the focus for Nigeria is a quality of education. And that must be what the regime must emphasize.
All right. You know, the chairman of the Presidential Task Force Reforms Committee also made reference to the issue of a tax to GDP ratio. I learned the soundbite is ready. So let's take a listen now. Then I guess we'll react to it.
With a high sense of urgency, without compromising diligence, we think that this is something we have to do together. So don't leave it to us. We're just representing you. We're on a mission, and we believe that the Nigeria today that we see, it's not the Nigeria of our dream. I haven't met one single Nigerian who says, this is my Nigeria. No. If it's not the Nigeria of our dream, then we have to work together to create that Nigeria of our future and of our dream, not tomorrow, starting from today. Like Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Thank you very much.
All right. We just listened to the chairman, Presidential Committee on Tax Reforms, where he talked about the fact that the present Nigeria that you have, looking at the state of the nation now, is not the Nigeria of our dream. How will you react to that?
Well, I cannot agree less. This is not the Nigerian that all of us are looking for. We're looking for a Nigerian that is prosperous. We're looking to a Nigerian that is home to every one of us. A Nigeria where people will be willing to make a living without necessarily having to travel anywhere. If you go to America, you see a lot of Americans who has never left America all their life. And they are comfortable. It's a home to everybody. If you go to the Arab, even when they leave, they go back, they want to come back to their country. They don't want to spend life anywhere. The real reason is because they've created that ecosystem where life is meaningful. Now, I was saying to somebody yesterday, and I asked him, you see, since independence, we can take an Israel of those who have governed us and see why has Nigeria as a country not have the privilege of having somebody good to lead us? That's the question. And he said to me, but yesteryears was good. I said, because you were not in yesteryears. If you were in 1960, you would have known that 1960 was not good. Because 1963, I remember, or 65, when Lee Kuan Yew came to Africa, he knew that we were going nowhere. He was not in Nigeria. He wrote it in his book, From Third World to First World, chapter 22, his encounter with Commonwealth. How our people were living. And to that very extent, when the coup came in 1966 of January, Lee Kuan Yew said he was not surprised. Because he knew Africa was going nowhere by the way we were driving. Then we have series of coups, coup upon coup. And now when you come to track those who have led us in these past years, from independence to today, now what you see is that we have always been led, as people say, by our worst. And I told the person yesterday, it's not just that we are led by our worst, it's a reflection of what all of us are. So if in a space of over 3 decades, 50 years, we are not able to find one good person who is going to pioneer development, we can call the names. So there's no point really having to encourage ourselves that life was better off in the 60s. Yes, you have more money, but you didn't know what to do with the money. Was it not in this Nigeria that were frittering money away and there were no infrastructure, there were no road, and somebody was the president and he didn't know what to do with the money? I said Nigeria was so rich with money and we don't know what to do with money. We even went to Grenada and paid their civil servant salary for 6 months. We've taken on projects which are not ours. While our people are wallowing in poverty, we were in ECOWAS, we were fighting apartheid in South Africa, and we were wasting resources. And these countries in Africa, which we have all supported with all our resources, have never voted for us. Even at the General United Nations Assembly, they have never taken position with us. So this is where, for me, the challenge really is. So this Nigeria we are seeing is not the Nigeria that we are all praying for. Oyedele said something. Now when you look at it, for example, in terms of nature, it's kind to us. Time zone is kind to us. Weather is kind to us. What is underground is kind to us. Everything is good for us. The only thing that is not good for us is governance. And that's where the challenge is. So he says, quoting Abraham Lincoln, the fact is that the only way to predict the future is to create that future. And that's what we will need to do. How do we create that future? We must begin to speak to our children and begin to encourage them. And that for me is where the conversation will need to start. And as a matter of fact, my submission here this morning is that all of us who are 50 years and above should be able to say to our children, we are very sorry because we have failed you. This is not a good life there is a better life. Because that's the only way to motivate the younger generation so that they will not follow our path. Because if they follow where we are going, where we are coming from, they will end up at the same destination.
All right, looking at creating a new path to progress, the U.S. Commercial Counselor to Nigeria, Julie Blank, at the event yesterday was saying that as the world looks to the future, Nigeria is a key leader on the African continent. You've enumerated how Nigeria supported various African countries, but this time around, they're looking at economic development in the continent, and they see Nigeria as a vital partner to the U.S. in advancing shared values, as they see that what benefits Nigeria benefits Africa and indeed the world. But let's look at what benefits Nigeria benefiting Africa in the economic sense. What would that be?
Well, we've heard this cliche over and over again. Nigeria, the giant of Africa, leader of the continent. And that's a point that I am speaking to. You see, those who drive, for example, our foreign policy, we've gotten to that level where we say, oh, the three concentric circle of the foreign policy direction of Africa. First ECOWAS, second AU, and then, of course, global. That we have to, first of all, look at what is happening in the Economic Community of West Africa. Just look at the coup in Niger. How are they deferring to us? No respect, no regard. Now you check out nations that Americans support. When Americans say this is the way, where do they follow? They move there. So, for you to be able to command influence, you must be strategic in terms of your dealing with your neighbors. And that's what we have not done well. Benin Republic is sabotaging us. Niger Republic sabotages us. And this is known to our people who are in power. When Nigeria make a policy to say this is what we want to do to control our economy, Benin reverses the policy. Because they are feeding through us. Now, do we have the willpower to call them to order? No. So, what you need to do is that you need to build up your power first. When you build up your power, then you are able really to fortify your borders. Then you are in a position to say, well, we can sanction you. Even with all the ECOWAS sanction against Niger Republic, things are still flying through our border to Niger. Why? Because your citizens who have no value will not allow your policy to succeed. You know, the story is told of China. They built a very massive wall to protect China from invasion. And they said in 100 years, Chinese states were invaded twice. And the people who came in, they walked through the gate. How? They gave money to the soldiers who were keeping the gate, and they opened the gate and allowed the enemy to come in. This is the situation we are facing. And that's why I keep speaking to values of our people. Now, it is only when we have people of value, people who prioritize their nation, who have national interests at heart, patriotic people, when the government says, Benin Republic, fuel will not pass this border, the fuel will not pass. And when they are feeling the heat, they will bow to your pressure. So this is, for me, the only way it can happen. Meeting in ECOWAS or AU will not solve that. And I think that's where Nigerian diplomats, Nigerian foreign ministers must be strategic in terms of relating with their neighbors.
All right, before we go on break, let me make reference to what the Director General of the World Trade Organization said to Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Listen, she said, Africa is underperforming as it accounts for only 3% or less of
increasing
global trade.
Trade and investment.
You're talking of Africa, that is the second largest continent after Asia, and yet we are recording this kind of statistics. What do you think is actually the problem here? Global trade, we are recording less than 3%, as emphasized by the DG of WTO.
What's responsible? Sorry, we'll have to quote the Holy Book. My people perish for lack of knowledge. That's always responsible.
What kind of knowledge here?
Now, let's look at agriculture, for example. Look at the innovation and creativity in that sector. We can't even feed ourselves. We have to rely on Thailand to bring us rice, Ukraine to get wheat and sorghum. So, people are talking about precision agriculture today. That you can sit down in the office and you look at a plot of land and you can determine the yield that can come from it in terms of outcome. Has Africa been able to achieve that? No. Any groundbreaking research in medicine? No. Any groundbreaking research in pharmacy? No. So, what are we good at? We are good at nothing.
You can't say Africa is good at nothing, at least.
See, we have to be honest with ourselves.
Well, honestly, would it be that Africa is good at nothing? It can't be absolutely nothing.
What are we good at? We want to be educated.
There are so many areas that Africa
just mention them so that it will become very easy. You see, even the trade we are talking about, this volume of trade we are talking about, and if you're going to look at the power behind it, you will see it's even the West that's driving it. Take, for example, the crude oil. I've said it here over and over again. The crude oil is here. If the people are not here to export this crude, we will not even have anything to sell.
But even in terms of human capital, for some of the developing countries, Africans have been instrumental to building.
No, don't turn history on its head.
No, it's not history.
You see, the point here is simple. When you say we are instrumental, yes, we have seen Africans or Nigeria excel elsewhere. They are excelling elsewhere because of the ecosystem that was created.
So it means that they are good at something.
It's not that we are good at something. Somebody is just exploiting and mining you to develop their resources. That's what it is. Let me give you one. Let me give you. Yes, we have the potential. That's what I'm saying. We have the potential. The potential to be world leaders. The potential to be world beaters. Because African is known for resilience. We have the power. We have the muscle. All we just need to do is to intellectually redirect our energy to things that are productive. Then you will see Africa emerge. And that is why what I'm saying is that, you see, all that is in Africa is potential. My history teacher told me something some years ago when I was in my undergraduate. And he said, while they were in Europe trying to read history of the world, they were teaching history to everybody. And then they taught the history of Asia, taught the history of Europe, history of America, and then they spoke about the history of colonialism in Africa. And then they asked the lecturer, I call his name Trevor Roper, and they said, when are you going to teach us the history of Africa? And he restarted, the history of Africa is the history of colonialism. Every other thing is darkness, and darkness is not a subject in history. So this is how we're conceived in 1965.
But it's totally true that every other thing before the colonial era is darkness.
Yeah, that was...
Because even the history books say civilization started in Egypt.
This was the statement made by Professor Trevor Roper in 1965. That what you see, the only thing that you can glean is the contact you're having with the West. So this for me is the issue. You see, there's a book written by Professor Jim Collins. It's called Good to Great. He says the starting point where you start to break through to becoming great is when you are able to, number one, acknowledge or you face what he called the brutal facts. For me, the brutal fact here is the fact that we must tell ourselves simple truth. And what is this simple truth? That we're contributing nothing.
3% cannot be nothing.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Now, when you go and look at African contribution to the 3%, if you go and look at the 3%, you will see that what we're actually contributing could be 0.05%.
But that's not the statistics that we have.
No. Yes, because he's saying that this thing is done in Africa. You're seeing Chinese everywhere. You're seeing Indians everywhere. You're seeing Europeans everywhere. You're seeing Americans everywhere helping this economy to grow. That's what you're seeing. And that's what is representing the 3%. That's what I'm saying. So what's our own value in terms of what is indigenous to us is almost zero. I am looking for that day that you're going to see that Africans are breaking through on research, that are pioneering. You see, people feel, professors in Nigeria University tell you and say, they don't accept us in our journal, their journals, because it's part of colonization. I said, no. If you find a solution, people will look for the solution. All right. You don't need, there's no color to it. If you have a ground-breaking solution to a problem, the world will look for you. So this for me is what it is. If Africa must lead, we must invest. We must invest. The paternalistic form of education in Nigeria, where it is only the professor that knows everything, had to stop. Okay. Children must be given the free hand to think and disrupt whatever so-called theories that the professors hold dear to their chest. And I think this is actually the thing that is pulling Africa back, where the professor sit down on a chair and everybody know nothing except the professor. And I don't think that is the way it is in the West, and that's what we need to mimic, and that is how African can be reimagined for economic growth.
Well, the heat here is getting too much, so we need to cool it down a while. The theme for the Africa Economic Summit is reimagining growth, economic growth for Africa. Let's go on a quick break. When we return, we'll be looking at the ways to reimagine economic growth for Africa. Stay tuned.
Broad Street. Broad Street, situated in Lagos Island, is steeped in Nigerian history. Once the biggest financial hub of the country, it housed the headquarters of major banks, linked the CBN, the stock exchange, and the loads of lender companies. Broad Street is a historically significant street. It has played a central role in the development of Lagos and history, an important commercial and administrative center for the British colonial authorities. It was also a home to some of the city's earliest modern buildings. Broad Street was a residential area in the pre-colonial era. With the British came the Methodist Boys High School in 1878 and the Broad Street Prison in 1882, renamed Freedom Park. The General Hospital, which was a British military hospital, was built in 1893, being the first general hospital in Nigeria. The old British Secretariat building, which is now the Federal Ministry of Justice, was built in 1906. Broad Street has seen a full turn into modern commercial office blocks, complexes, skyscrapers, and markets from the outer marina through Akpombo early into the Adeliji Adele Road. Broad Street is one of the busiest streets in Nigeria on weekdays, where commercial activities take place day and night. From modern buildings to ancient structures, this street gives one a raw dose of life in Lagos. Broad Street is often referred to as Lagos Financial District. It boasts a mix of architectural styles, reflecting its long history, colonial-era buildings, Victorian and Edwardian architectural features, alongside more modern skyscrapers and structures. Broad Street remains a vital, vibrant part of the Nigerian economy. Broad Street. Souq Enlightenment.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamans.
Still a deficit budget, we're still going to borrow as much as up to 7-9 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby. So the first thing that is done is for the...
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring back Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development. The National Theatre, Igomu, built during the military regime of Olusegun Obasanjo and finished in the time for the Second World Festival of Black Arts and Culture, Festac in 1977. The theater holds amazing treasures and memories. The artworks fill everyone with pride. The National Arts Theatre is visible from the motorway which connects Lagos Island and the mainland. The National Theatre is packed with the artworks of legendary contemporary Nigerian artists, stained glass walls by Yusuf Grillo, sculptures and murals by Lamidi Fakeye, Erabo Emopai, and many others.
My name is Veronica Nkechi Eze.
Charles Abana. My name is Professor Martins Emeje.
Professor Sylvester Odion Akaine.
Keep watching Souq
News TV.
The best news channel online.
It's elevating, it's enlightening, it's educating.
Muhammad Ali found this route in Africa. Rumble in the jungle. I swear the king is humble. Jesse Jackson, O.J. Simpson, this is black history. Andrew Young visit Africa in the late 60s. Legend, Bob Marley make the light different. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X are big names. They fought for black Americans in the old days. We need the same revolution in our own ways. Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Mr. Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre and Eddie Murphy. American prosperity ain't complete with African poverty. It's legendary Idris Abdul Karim, and you are on to Souq News. You don't touch that dial.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamans.
Still a deficit budget, we're still going to borrow as much as up to 7-9 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby. So the first thing that is done is for the...
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring back Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Alright, that sounds interesting. There you have VIPs complementing the programming and the efforts being made by Souq TV. I would say kudos to the management of Souq TV. It's the Early Exchange, and we're looking at the African Trade and Investment Summit that happened in Lagos yesterday. We're looking at the highlights, and we still have our in-house analyst with us. All right, now let's wrap up this conversation by looking at what Taiwo Yedele also talked about, the issue of tax to GDP ratio. He talked about the need to raise it from 10% to 18%. As we speak, it's at 10%. And the plan is to raise it to 18% in the next 3 years. Do you see this becoming a reality, and what are some of the challenges that this could spring up?
Yeah, like I said before, it's very, for me, important that we're having a president who is determined to see Africa grow. And from what Taiwo said yesterday, we don't need to tax the seed. We need to tax only the fruits. And of course, you know that you have to first of all plant the seed and allow it time to flourish before you start to harvest. And that's very philosophical for me, coming from the president and based on the mandate that is given to the committee. And that's what Taiwo is also saying to civil society group, media group, to put pressure on the politicians. I underline that word. We need to put pressure on the politicians to allow some of these policies to thrive. We don't need new taxes, and he was very clear about that. It's not more taxes we need. All that we just need to do is to be able to harvest all these informal taxes that is happening at the state levels, local level, that is getting into the wrong hand, and allow them come into the coffers of government. If that is done, and I can bet you we don't need 3 years, in 1 year, our tax to GDP ratio can be up to 20-25%.
All right. The Africa Trade and Investment Summit had as its theme yesterday, reimagining economic growth in Africa. Looking at investments that come into Africa, is there a way to creatively target that to development that will transform Africa?
I think when you look at the concept of reimagining, it means that you're saying, like Albert Einstein has said, that it's only a madman who will be doing the same thing and will be expecting a different outcome. There's a path that we have been towing for years, and it has not brought us any significant progress. So what the theme is for me is that what are the new ways we can think to rebuild Africa? And these are the new ways we're talking about. And I said here yesterday, all that we need is a simple thing. And I think that also alluded to it, is create that ecosystem that will be attractive to investment. We don't need to be junketing the continents of the world looking for foreign direct investment. Create an ecosystem that is fine. And once people see that there is opportunity for profit in your area, they will come. Did we invite colonial masters to come to Africa? We did not invite them. They came on their own. So why are we now going there to go and invite them to come and invest? There were things they saw in Africa that brought them in here. They needed pepper. They saw it was in Africa. Nobody told them to come. There was no plane traveling anywhere in the world before they came. They were looking for opportunity. They saw it in Africa and they took advantage of it. Why is it now we are now going to go and beg them to come and invest in Africa? That will not work. What will work is Africa must create an environment that will be so attractive for foreign direct investment that everybody in the world will say, this is a haven here. We want to come and do business here because there's opportunity in this place. That is the task that's before leadership, and that's what our governments have to do.
All right. Finally, before we wrap up this segment, according to the DG of the World Trade Organization, that Africa only accounts for 3% of global trade. How can Africa increase that, having so many natural resources, but yet accounting for only 3% of global trade?
It starts with first feeding yourself. And that's the starting point for us as Africa. There's a whole lot of gaps in terms of food production in Africa. So which means we are not even able to feed ourselves. So we are depending on the Western developed nations to feed. This is a problem. So Africa must come of age to be able to feed itself first and foremost and provide for itself basic necessity that they need. That reduces the trade deficit. And then we can go and give food to people who are hungry in Europe. We can be giving food to people. If you go to UK today, government is trying to feed everybody. They are in trouble. Africa can give them food. And then we make so much money. But how do we require our research institutions to do their due diligence? Because Europe or UK will not take any food from you that is carcinogenic. So we must find a way through research to see all the carcinogenic elements, things that can create disease. We take them from the things that we are producing here so that they can access the world market. And if that is done, then you make more money and you contribute greater to world trade. That for me is the simple recipe.
All right, we just have to leave the conversation here. Dr. Idauza, we have to thank you for your time, your thoughts, and your submission. You're passionate about Africa, that's obvious. And
that's why it looks so African.
Yes, of course. So that we can start from here.
That's great.
Thank you so very much for having me this morning.
All right, we'll go on a short break now. When we return, we'll have another special guest. We'll be looking at something quite important, which has to do with Africa as well. All you just have to do is stay with us.
Tafawa Balewa Square, TBS. Tafawa Balewa Square was initially used as a horsing ground called Lagos Race Course. The edifice was constructed by General Yakubu Gowon in 1972 and named after Nigeria's first Prime Minister, Sir Tafawa Balewa. Tafawa Balewa Square is located at 45/57 Masi Bangboshe Street on Lagos Island, Lagos, and referred to as TBS. TBS is a 50,000-seater capacity venue and houses the Remembrance Arcade, the 26-story Independence House, which at a time was the country's tallest building. When Lagos served as the country's seat of government, the National Assembly Complex was within the TBS. Also in the square are the National Broadcasting Commission Office, the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency Office, shopping centers, travel agencies, restaurants, car parking lots, and a bus terminal. Tafawa Balewa Square is adorned with beautiful statues of white horses and red eagles, symbols of strength and dignity. Our historic neighbors include the King's College and the Holy Cross Cathedral. Tafawa Balewa Square hosted some of the country's memorable events, such as the Independence Day in 1960, when Nigeria gained independence from Britain, the Armed Forces Remembrance Day, which is celebrated annually on January 15. The edifice is a national cultural asset. Tafawa Balewa Square, Souq Enlightenment.
My name is Veronica Eze.
Charles Abana. My name is Professor Martins Emeje.
Professor Sylvester Odion Akaine.
Keep
watching
Souq News TV,
the best news channel online.
It's elevating, it's enlightening, it's educating.
Muhammad Ali found this route in Africa. Rumble in the jungle. I swear the king is humble. Jesse Jackson, O.J. Simpson, this is black history. Andrew Young visit Africa in the late 60s. Legend, Bob Marley make the light different. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X are big names. They fought for black Americans in the old days. We need the same revolution in our own ways. Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Mr. Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre and Eddie Murphy. American prosperity ain't complete with African poverty. It's legendary Idris Abdul Karim, and you are on to Souq News. You don't touch that dial.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamans.
Still a deficit budget, we're still going to borrow as much as up to 7-9 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby. So the first thing that is done is for the...
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring back Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, if you're just joining us, you're joining us at the right time, and you have no cause to worry. We're still looking at issues related to tax reforms in Nigeria, and thereafter we'll talk about the latest development as regards the exit of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger from ECOWAS. To help us shed more light on this, we are privileged to be joined by another guest who, interestingly, this month is his birth month. And we have the privilege of hosting Dr. Ken Keowa, who is a business and public policy analyst, also a lecturer at the University of Lagos. Glad to have you join us this morning.
Good morning, Femi. Good morning, Blessing.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me on.
Good to see you. So let me say happy month. I can understand from your outfit, that's why you're looking like a chief.
I'm actually a chief.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, where I come from, I'm actually a red cap chief.
Oh, great.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I want to be more Afrocentric in this month of February.
That's interesting.
Let's start thinking Africa and thinking how we can help Africa evolve away from the many quagmires we're having to deal with.
That's great.
All right, some behind-the-scene talk got us to know that the Red Cap Chief was born in the red month. You know, February is a month of love, and red is the symbol of love. So I want to say happy birthday in advance.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll make sure you guys are around for my celebration.
Okay, we'll make sure of that too.
All right, let's get to business now. Let's start with the conversation we talked about earlier. You know, we talked about the Africa Trade and Investment Summit that happened in Lagos yesterday. One of the key issues being raised by the keynote speakers, one of the keynote speakers, which has to be the chairman of the Presidential Tax Reforms Committee, Taiwo Idele, was the fact that they observed that Nigerians are being obliged or compelled to pay about 200 unofficial taxes compared to the 60 that are officially approved. What's your reaction to this?
Well, I have spoken betimes on this subject matter. I'm glad you're giving me the privilege to talk about this again. And I did say that I will be going Afrocentric this month and possibly for the rest of the year. So the issues with Nigeria is that to an extent we're too verbose. We talk. I've been hearing these 200 taxes. Nobody has even been able to actually itemize what these taxes are. Let's just leave it at the basic fact, Femi. Nigeria is a highly, overly taxed country. Nigerians pay tax. Inflation is a tax on its own. The fact that you have to provide for yourself basic amenities that government should provide and sustain for you, that is another form of taxation. We have social taxation, we have emotional taxation. So the issues bother on, repeating the obvious, and it's now sounding like a broken record. We Nigerians are getting tired of these theories of these red cap chiefs, black cap chiefs, white cap chiefs coming to just talk. We need action. Nigerians are suffering. Nigerians are hungry, all right? Nigerians are burdened. They are belabored with much more than is, able for them to actually bear. So telling us we've been having 200 taxes, we want to reduce to 60, how does that affect emancipating the standard of living for the common man? So I would rather we have a situation whereby people are not talking too much, and let's have results. We need strategic action plans or strategic plans of action to get us out of where we are. This is a terrible economic conundrum. And reminding me again of my problem doesn't solve the problem. All right? If you are driving out of your house, people are there. If you're coming by public transport, I take public transport a lot, not because I can't afford to drive, but it's faster. I mean, if I was to drive here today, I won't be here on time for this program. And then I interact with these people in Keke Napep, with, these people in buses. The average Keke Napep rider in Lagos tells me that they pay about 3,600 naira as tax, receipted and unreceipted. Question is, who is collecting this tax? So the tax problem in Nigeria has assumed diabolic, cartelic dimensions. There's a cartel behind it. And the best way to address it is to call the spade and do the right thing that will remove the burden from Nigerians. And I also think too that Nigerians are not paying the tax that they're supposed to pay. So it's a symbiosis of contradictions, which I hope the chairman of this tax committee would be able to address. Now, when he started saying this when he was appointed, he said they had a 1-year timeline. 3 months have gone. We've seen no action. We're getting into 6 months. I've seen no results. So we'll be watching from the cove, and we'll be putting on our black caps and red caps and white caps and doing the analysis and other caps. Yeah.
All right. So still we're in the thinking cap right now. Let's look at one statement that is also credited to the chairman of the Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform Committee, Taiwo Idili, when he said that area boys can be trained to collect taxes. Now, you talked about giving the example of some Keke Napep drivers saying that they pay as much as 3,600 receipted and unreceipted taxes. Now, if that comes into play, the, in quote, area boys, using them to collect taxes, do you say it's increasing more? And with the issue of reducing the taxes from 200 to 60, how do you see all of this playing out at the end of the day to avoid leakages and the right money go to the coffers of the government?
All right. I'm quite disappointed that Mr. Taiwo Oyedele would make such a statement. And that will be dignifying, the lifestyle of the so-called area boys. Because there is none of us seated here today that will tell us that you've had any friendly encounter with area boys. And now that brings me back and away from the subject matter into our system of education in this country. Now, these area boys, these so-called area boys that you have branded as area boys, is this the best we could have done with their human and intellectual capital? I have met area boys and I call them back and I ask, are you a graduate? Because the kind of English, the kind of grammar, the kind of charisma they carry, you know that this probably must have been somebody that could have been a doctor, he could have been an engineer, he could have been perhaps a fashion designer, but did not have the opportunity, and the only outlet for him to survive was to go to the streets. And so for you to now say we can now train them, these are people that are another category of social miscreants, and you want us to train them to start collecting taxes. How will the taxes get to the coffers where they're supposed to get to? And again, this brings in the issue of the cartel that might be behind the excess burden of taxation of Nigerians in Nigeria. So I think there are better ways. And the most excellent way which, you know, the nations of the world, serious nations of the world are taking now, is to drive taxation revenue collection through technology. Okay? You go to some countries now and you have to pay your road tax. Nobody's on the road collecting it. You have a card, you get to a machine, you swap, and you move. You go to the airports and you have this or that pay. No custom official is writing you any receipt. You get, that is the machine, you go there, you swap your credit card or your debit card, and you pay. So e-taxation, electronic processes is what I would have expected an individual in the caliber and person of Taiwo Oyedele to be emphasizing. Instead of telling us that area boys should continue to run after. Have you seen what those boys do on the road sometimes? You know, with these buses and with this keke, they seize their things, they threaten them, they even stop vehicles from moving. No, that's not the way to go. We're in the era of technology. This is the 21st century. I expect that we should start thinking of driving taxation, tax administration, tax collection with technology. That is the surest, best way to avoid leakages and to step up the tax net and get more into the coffers of the different levels of government.
All right. It's important to also note that Taiwo Oyedele has also refuted that claim. What he was just trying to say, making reference to that, was that there's a need to carry everybody along. He's not saying officially that the federal government is going to engage the area boys, so he had cleared that. But away from that, let's look at the issue of the exit of Mali, the trial of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger from ECOWAS, which is the thrust of our discussion now. It's been some days now. How will you assess how ECOWAS is handling this crisis? It's a looming crisis which is going to go beyond West Africa. But how will you assess the way ECOWAS is handling this crisis, knowing fully well that our president is the chairman, and what could be the likely impact of this on Nigeria, because our president is occupying a very sensitive role, which also has influence, or whatever happens with the role being played by the president this time around will affect Nigeria. What's your take on this?
All right, I think we're going to have or need maybe a whole day to look into this issue. It's quite an emotional one for me. I would go back to some 30, 40 years down the line, because I remember that the first time I heard the acronym ECOWAS was sometime in the mid-80s or thereabout, when I was preparing for common entrance. And you had then, you know, to cram, as it were, the meaning of some of these acronyms. What does ECOWAS mean? Economic Community of West African State. What does OAU mean? Because you'll be asked some of these questions either in your national common entrance or in your interview into the secondary school. Sadly, I know that a few of our children these days may not even know what some of these acronyms mean. Well, what is the implication? Before we look at the implication, we look at what first and foremost has been the reaction of ECOWAS. One, I was particularly pained when I heard that 3 countries had, in the words of Barack Obama, embarked out of ECOWAS with the audacity you know, of hope, in quotes. So it's the audacity for me, that's one. It is the hope that they would be able to thrive on their own. That's the second. So what they have gone ahead to do is to create what they call the Alliance États du Sahel, AES, which means the Alliance of Sahel States. So they want to stay on their own. And I've been looking at the map to actually see how landlocked they are together. And the three of them are just there so they can stand. And that still doesn't augur very well for the community, you know, as it were. Now, what has been the reaction of ECOWAS, which is the first question you asked? What I have been trying to explore in across the internet, across the broadcast media, doesn't particularly show or point to the fact that ECOWAS has even come to terms with that reality. The first day this news broke out, I was watching, I was listening across different international platforms, and I think the spokesman from ECOWAS said that they had not received any communique to that effect. So the first thing I would say for now, as at this morning, is that ECOWAS is still in denial with respect to the sensitivity of the matter on ground and the reality of the matter on ground.
Is it an issue of denial, or there has to be an official communication if those states are breaking away from ECOWAS?
Well, not just that there has to be an official communication. There has to be an official communication that must give a timeline of 1 year to the economic community to say, okay, over the next 1 year, by this time, January 2025, you should no longer count us members. So if they actually wanted to embark on this journey, they should have given that notification about a year or 6 months ago. But we just said a few days ago that we're out, and they're on their own.
So going by that, it is not really denial.
Well, denial is a strategy. Denial is a strategy because if you can for now say you don't want to talk, silence is also a strategy. But in law, we also say silence is consent, okay? But the fact is, there is a reality on ground. And I'm happy you're bringing this up so that we can actually explore what are the impacts, okay? What are the counterproductive impacts, both for the other states in ECOWAS and both for these Sahel states now that have actually pulled out. Now, the implication, again, for me is that it brings a systematic imbalance in the political calculus of the West African regional bloc, okay? And I mean, for those of us that did some further maths, we know that calculus has to do with differentiation and integration. So you bring that into sociology, we're looking at differences in the 14, 15 states that are in West Africa, and ECOWAS is about integration. So for now, for you to now see 2, 3 states saying we want to be on our own, Guinea has long been suspended for about a year now since they had a coup there, it is reducing, it is creating a new direction for the political calculus of West African states. Who is set to gain or who is set to lose is what we can at best explore here. But one important thing is that there is a renaissance that is taking place in Africa, and most states are beginning to come into their own. They want to be self-determined. They want to control their resources. They want to give a better standard of living, better life, you know, to their people. So we must look at the calculus and give a fair analysis, give an unbiased analysis on what is actually on ground, and also see how we can advise the Nigerian government and possibly the Nigerian president on how he can go about this matter and reintegrate all aggrieved parties into the community.
All right, let's pick up from where you left off. Who is to gain and who is to lose from this? Now, 3 countries pulling out from ECOWAS, a 15-member country regional body, and like you said, Guinea has been suspended. Who gains? Who loses?
Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. So the question of gains and the question of losses would actually be in the eyes of the beholder. As pragmatists that we are, we can sit down here and do all the analysis. But in the end, you and I are not living in Niger, Mali, or Burkina Faso. You and I do not know what those people have had to bear in the hands of neo-colonial forces in the last 60 years that has led to this response, which in their view is an attempt to liberate their people, liberate their economy, liberate their psycho-spiritual soul of the nation, and realign with more progressive countries to move their country forward. Now let's come back to the gains and the losses, because we must actually do that analysis. We must look at that analysis given three basic dimensions. Look at the political aspect to it, look at the economic aspect to it, look at the compliance aspect to it, and we should look at the sociological aspect to it. Let's start with the economics. Because the economics plays a major role in the existential potential of any country. So, economically, how will these countries fare? Now, the largest nation across the ECOWAS regional bloc in terms of GDP, in terms of population size, is Nigeria. So Nigeria is like a big brother to most of these countries. These three nations, the AES nations, Mali, Burkina Faso, and now Niger Republic, only constitute and contribute 10% to the GDP of the West African Economic Bloc. You say 10%, 0.1. That may be insignificant. In statistics, we talk about significance and insignificant. That may appear insignificant, but there might be some correlates that the 0.1%, even though it's a weak correlation, could have impacting other variables within, this body of variables that we try to look at. Are they going to gain by standing on their own? Yes, there might be some gains for them. The gains will come in form of cooperation, internal trade within themselves. Now, don't forget, this removal of this withdrawal of these countries from, this economic bloc is also in view of an alignment with another economic regional power. I'm not going to dignify that country by mentioning names, okay? But we know that there are some countries now that are giving vent and giving encouragement to the liberation, to the fight for economic liberation and prosperity of these countries. Can these countries actually help out? Where the challenge will actually come is that the countries that control the destinies of the global economy, the GDPs of the global economy, will also want to have a share in the pie of these countries. Niger is very, very rich in uranium and gold. I can't say too much for Burkina Faso or for Mali. I know Mali, I think, also very rich in gold. So when you look at that, I also cross-checked the trading and bilateral relations between these three states or three countries and other countries in the West African bloc. Most of their trade, the highest of their trade volumes actually come from other ECOWAS member states. But don't forget, ECOWAS is by default polarized. What do I mean? We have the Francophone countries and we have the Anglophone countries. And you would not expect the Francophone countries to deny their brothers and say because of one ECOWAS committee, we're no longer going to trade with Burkina Faso, we're no longer going to travel to Niger Republic. That brings us to the compliance issue. Politically, who gains? Nobody gains. This is not a win-win situation for anybody. Let's just be sincere. Because when you discuss the politics, you must also reference the major issues that contribute to the existential threats of the nations in the regional bloc, which is security, especially with Nigeria in view. These countries, Niger, Chad, Niger in particular, have provided a first front of defense to an extent, all right, for Nigeria in terms of the insurgents that have tried to come in with arms, with ammunition through the Sahel after the disintegration of Libya. This is the fact on ground. So if we now make those states pariah states, if we now decide to sanction them, if we now decide to say we're doing away with them, what will be the security implications for Nigeria? Let's come back to economics because we can't finish this analysis. When you look at the map of Nigeria up north, The air route, the airspace for us, you and I, who love to travel a lot outside Nigeria, go and spend our dollars outside Nigeria instead of spending it in Obudu Ranch and in other places where we can have attractions. You need to fly through Niger, for the most part, before you go into Europe. That is not the only route, but that's the shortest route that makes the airfare the cheapest. If we decide to, if Niger, for instance, decides to close its airspace against Nigeria, Nigerians will have to travel to Togo, Ghana, Cotonou, and through Comoro Islands and come. So a flight to the UK, which otherwise should have taken about 6 hours, will end up costing Nigerians more and spending more time in the air, about 12 hours. So there are multiple implications, all right, for the countries involved and for the receiving countries, Nigeria and other members of the economic bloc. There is no win-win situation here. I wouldn't say if there is a lose-lose situation, but let's continue the analysis and we will break more things open as far as this this issue is concerned.
All right, let's look at the power play, playing out in the global space. It's a public secret that Russia is also providing some support to some of these countries, which I know that was what you didn't want to say.
Russia, right?
Through the activities of the Wagner groups, they've been providing some logistics, some equipment when it comes to some of these war and all that. But in this kind of power play in the world politics, what do you think is playing out with Russia coming to offer support to some of these countries, and then the struggle, to have a grip on the continent, which is Africa? You have the West on the other part, and you also have the Russia. You also have China. The power play, the struggle to take over Africa or provide what's seeming like a support to Africa, or project themselves as strategic partners to Africa. It's on the table. How do you see this playing out?
Well, like I said the last time I was here on this program, I did say, and Blessing re-echoed that, the more, the merrier. But it's very important that we scrutinize every intention of any economic superpower or any military superpower that is coming into Africa, coming into any African state, any African country, to vest interest and to show interest. Now, as a public policy analyst and as an Afrocentric scholar, I am not vested in my commitment to any particular country, because all countries act in their interests. There are two permanent interests in global politics. One is the existential interest. Every country will do everything possible to perpetuate their existence. Two is the economic interest. So you, that is a country that is on the receiving end, you are the one that should sit down and say, these countries are coming now because they have existential interest and economic interest. Don't forget, these Sahel countries and other countries in Africa are highly endowed, not just with mineral resources, but now we're beginning to see that Africans have Africans who were hitherto called inferior Homo sapiens have superb intellect. And you can see the intentionally designed brain drain that is taking place in Africa in the name of Jakpa, in the name of come and study, in the name. I'll come back to Russia. All right. When we talk about this issue of brain drain, let me shock you. You'll be shocked that many Nigerians are leaving Nigeria to go and study in universities in Europe, in universities that are not as rated at University of Lagos globally. They are not as rated as University of Ibadan. They are not as rated as Ambrose Ali University in Ekpoma or Commonwealth University, that's a private university. And then you ask yourself, what are Nigerians leaving highly rated Nigerian universities, globally rated as very high, to go and study in substandard universities abroad? There is a systematic attempt to once again import our human and intellectual capital to come and serve the whims and caprices of countries in the West. Why would Russia be showing interest in Africa at this point in time? Let me be fair to Russia. Let history be fair to Russia. Russia did not participate in the scramble and in the dividing of Africa 200 years down the line. So if there's any saint amongst all of these countries, we should be pointing to Russia as a saint. In fact, and indeed, Russia actually contributed to the struggle for independence, for political liberation of most African countries. But the problem with Russia is that as at then, it was a fully fledged communist state. So the idea, it was the Soviet Republic back then, the idea was not just to help these African countries be liberated from colonial, shackles of colonialism, but to also sell the ideology of communism, to some of these states, which was creating a problem for other Western states. All I would just say to our brothers in the Sahel states, is be careful. Trust, like Ronald Reagan said, trust, but verify. Simple. A word is enough for the wise.
Okay. All right. Let's look at resolving the issues. ECOWAS says that it will come to some negotiation with the three countries. And one of the reasons that these countries have given, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, is that the ECOWAS has deviated from the agenda of the founding fathers. Is there a way to reconcile that? And they also, for instance, Niger talked about ECOWAS response to the coup in Niger and the other countries. They call it the fight for a new path for them. So what can bring about peaceful resolution of this disagreement?
Well, you've taken the words straight from the mouth of those that are the most affected. Like I said, we are in the studio. Those that are wearing the shoes in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and in Niger, they know where the shoes actually hurt. The initial goal for ECOWAS was to promote integration amongst the states in the region, to facilitate trade, and to facilitate support for one another to grow. And at some point in time, I think it also included, supporting brother and sister nations to be liberated from the shackles of colonialism. Are these states right to say that ECOWAS has actually departed from, the raison d'etre why ECOWAS was actually set up in the first place? Let's be fair to them. Yes, ECOWAS has departed. But again, why did the Nigerian president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, why did other ECOWAS, heads of states and government, why did they take the stand they took? Coups have contagion effects. It starts in one place, the next state, neighboring states, sees a reason why we cannot also do it. And soldiers, ab initio, were never trained to lead people politically. They were trained to protect the people and the territorial integrity of whatever state or country they found themselves. I cannot particularly say of any country where coups have taken place that those countries have done fantastically well. You may want to make reference to Libya, Gaddafi, but in the end, when you look at documentaries that have come up years after, you will see how much those people actually suffered under military rule. Now, how can we facilitate, is there going to be a hope for reconciliation? On the basis of the allegations that these AES states have put on ground. One, that during the coup, they were not supported because they are saying that they were protecting their patrilineal rights, their patrimony, to liberate their country from the colonial master. In other words, they never actually gained independence. They were just, on paper. And have you gone back to see the agreement, the post-colonial agreement that these countries, these Francophone countries have with France? It is pathetic. Can there be a reconciliation? Honestly, on my own, in my view, in my capacity as a social thinker, I do not see the possibility of reconciliation in the next 1 or 2 years. I see the possibilities or the probabilities of engagement. What we need now is to engage these states Engagement doesn't come by the way of support. Engagement comes by the way of, okay, give us a timeline. What do you intend to do? How do you intend to do it? When do you intend to return your country back to sustainable democratic rule? That should have been the first thing. Not to come with a hammer, sledgehammer, and say, we close the airspace, we cut off electricity. There were agreements, and mutually beneficial agreements between Niger and Nigeria, for instance. All right? Don't forget the River Niger also passes through there. Don't forget that they give us some form of first line of security defense. And there's this agreement with respect to supply of electricity. And it has never been violated for over 40 years. You now come, you cut them off that grid. You now come, you say they cannot trade with other ECOWAS member states. How does that, what should actually have been done is to bring them on the table, and what we need to do now is to bring them on the table and ask them, give us an explanation or give us a blueprint of how you intend to return your country back to sustainable democratic rule. That will be the first strategy, engagement of promoting the fastest route to reconciliation with these countries. That is my take.
All right. Unfortunately, we just have to wrap up now. We know this is a developing story. We'll still have cause to bring you back for you to talk about some of the latest trends and things that will unfold as the week goes by. We must say thank you for your thought, your submission as regards the issue of the exit of these countries from ECOWAS. No doubt you've actually provided the right insight. Thank you so much for your time.
Justice to the issues.
Thank you for having me on. I hope to be back soon.
All right, of course, we'll bring it back as the event unfolds regarding that.
My name is Dr. Ajili Tobi. My name is Etemere Glover. Naomi, well done, and shout out to Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. I want to encourage everyone to keep watching Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News, and yes, tune into them.
Keep watching Souq News. They are one in town.
Hey, we're watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. Catch them on YouTube and all social media channels.
Hey, my name is Frank Edowo, and I'm imploring you. No, forget that. I am forcing you, coercing you to always stay tuned to Souq News for your news requirements.
The National Theatre, Igomu, built during the military regime of Olusegun Obasanjo and finished in the time for the Second World Festival of Black Arts and Culture, Festac, in 1977. The theatre holds amazing treasures and memories. The artworks fill everyone with pride. The National Arts Theatre is visible from the motorway which connects Lagos Island and the mainland. The National Theatre is packed with the artworks of a legendary contemporary Nigerian artist, stained glass walls by Yusuf Grillo, sculptures and murals by Lamidi Fakeye, Erabo Emopai, and many others. It was put to full use for a month as one of the 4 venues of the Second World Black and African Festival of Arts and Culture, tagged Festac 77. The complex hosted 16,000 participants from 56 African countries and the diaspora in an unprecedented showcase of African music, fine art, literature, drama, dance, and religion. The National Art Theatre was built and designed by Techno Expert Stroll, a Bulgarian company mirroring the Palace of Culture and Sports in Varna, Bulgaria. Completed in 1976, the building is one of the largest and most beautiful of its kind on the African continent. It consists of a central hall with 5,000 seats, a collapsible stage that can be quickly rebuilt, a conference hall with 1,600 seats, 2 large exhibition halls, and 2 cinemas with 800 seats each. The theater complex has a dressing room for artists, a garage, offices, coffee bars, and a buffet. It has indoor TV and radio systems, as well as booths with facilities for simultaneous translation of languages and hectares of lush green lawn around. The majestic structure sits in Igomu like a quiet mountain, mesmerizing visitors and passers-by. The National Theatre, Souq, enlightenment.
My name is Veronica Nkechi Eze.
Charles Abana. My name is Professor Martins Emeje.
Professor Sylvester Odion Akaine.
Keep
watching
Souq News TV.
The best news channel online.
It's elevating, it's enlightening, it's educating.
Muhammad Ali found this route in Africa. Rumble in the jungle. I swear the king is humble. Jesse Jackson, O.J. Simpson, this is black history. Andrew Young visit Africa in the late 60s. Legend, Bob Marley make the life different. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X are big names. They fought for black Americans in the old days. We need same revolution in our own ways. Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Mr. Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre and Eddie Murphy. American prosperity ain't complete with African poverty. It's legendary Idris Abdul Karim, and you are on to Souq News. You don't touch that dial.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Ida Hosa or Salmons.
Still a deficit budget, we're still going to borrow as much as up to 7 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby. So the first thing that is done is for the...
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring back Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
We're glad to know you're still with us on Early Exchange. Now, someone said something that if you want to hide something from a black man, put it in a book. What the person was trying to say is that Africans or people of the black race do not naturally take to reading as a culture. And so today, let's look at that. Is that narrative still true? What has happened to the reading culture? Has it changed for better, or it's become worse off? To talk about this, we have Ekom Henry, who is a professional book consultant and with All Range Limited. Good morning, welcome to Early Exchange.
Good morning, thank you for having me.
All right, like I was saying, that it has been said that you want to hide something from the black man, put it in a book. As that narrative change, are people taking more to reading now?
Well, thank you. I would like to say that that narrative has not really changed. And you look at the reading culture with regards to the economy, with regard to the exposure, with regard to the educational capacity of the country or the institution. It does not actually have to do with the black people or the black race. It's a general survey, because the reading culture is a pervasive thing, you know, where you train people, you train children to read at an early age. You catch them young. You know, you make the books available, you encourage the book culture, the book tradition. You know what reading does to children or to adults? There are so many benefits of reading. To put it in a nutshell, it broadens our outlook. It helps in managing stress. It exposes you to the world. You can sit in your locality and know what is happening in almost all the countries of the world, all the issues. You understand? So reading culture has not really changed. In fact, it has gotten a bit worse because our investments in education, our budgets in education has not really improved because, one, these books have to be available. There has to be libraries in different nooks and crannies, from the primary schools to the secondary schools to the tertiary level. And we don't want to talk much about the e-environment, the digital environment, but I think for now, I want to say that the culture, the reading culture, has not improved.
All right. According to the World Cultural Score Index, Nigeria is miscalled 38%, you know, when it comes to having people that are lettered. But let's go back to history. In the 60s, 70s, even the 80s, you discover that public reading, the issue of reading was like the order of the day. But look at the state of our libraries now. Could it be one of the factors responsible for this? If you those era you have public libraries being patronized every day, but now technology has taken over and certain factors has made this thing to be things that are dwindling as we speak. What are the things responsible for these, and how can they be corrected for Africans to develop this reading culture?
Thank you so much. Very important question. You see, in the 70s, in the 80s, when we're still coming up as a country, we found out that there was the competition and the challenge among young people to read, to reach out to their worlds. So many states and local government had functioning libraries, well-equipped libraries. There were budget for libraries and books were coming in from everywhere in the world. You can see how Nigerian literary landscape grew. We have profound and international writers like Chinua Achebe. We have Wole Soyinka, the great laureate. We have Ngugi wa Thiong'o from East Africa. We have Kenneth Kaunda from South Africa. From where we were growing up, we sat down here in our schools and we knew what was happening in South Africa. We knew about apartheid regime because we read books like A Walk in the Night by Alex Lagoma. We read books by Amai Taadu. We had the Peseta series. We read books from Hadley Chase. And these books were available in most libraries. We were in school, we were competing to read them. I read a lot of series from Hadley Chase. There were so many other Robbins and all that. And these books helped us to grow and exposed us to the world around us. Not just novels and literature. You can read books on environments. When you read books on environment, you read books on history, you become a part of that culture. You don't need to be an environmental scientist to know about global warming and climate change. You understand? So books open up an individual. It helps the creative capacity of a person, of a child. And the more you read, the more the tendency to want to write, because you have now had a great intercourse with ideas. When you read, you become a participant in the intellectual world. You are no more ignorant. You know exactly what is happening. You know of world affairs. You know about the World War. You know about the First World War, the Second World War, and even the impending situations in politics and culture and tourism. So books, as we were told, as we were taught, there was no way to escape it, because if you are going to enter into your world in the future, you have to have intercourse with books. So now the investments in our libraries are very, very poor. If you go to some state libraries, it's been overtaken by rats. It's been overtaken by weeds. And events around the libraries have been reduced to the barest minimum because our focus and our investment in education and in books has greatly reduced.
All right, but even like that, with the state of the libraries, these days there are e-books, and it should have been expected that would make it easy. Are there distractions that makes reading difficult in this time?
Now you're talking about the e-books? Yeah. Well, I believe that the e-books and the e-trends are very good, granting access to a wide variety of materials across the world. But I dare say that the e-environment can be very destructive, especially to young people or the young adults. Because one, we are looking at the technology, we are looking at the power situation, because most libraries now have e-sections. E-libraries, we go to some university, have the e-library, find out that most of the time those libraries, those e-sections are not functioning. Why? Because of power outages. You know, these infrastructures, these IT equipment need steady light. And sometimes those infrastructures are vandalized by dubious students. So people still have to go back to taking their books to read. I'm not surprised when some religious establishment or some believe that you must open the book. You know, as you said rightly from the beginning, that if you have something in a book, you know, you see, if you look at the book of Daniel, Daniel said, I, Daniel, understood by books. So understanding is by books. You can now read your book and then have access to reference materials from different sources on the online, because some information online cannot be quite verified. So if you are doing a research per se, yes, online can be very good. But if you want to have a study to understand book, to understand writing, to understand literature, to understand the world, you must engage yourself in habitual reading. Read, review, question, and analyze. So this is what we're talking about. The online environment is good, but we believe that government must encourage the setting up of book clubs. Set up book club, young book clubs, like we have the Channel Book Club, you know about that. And we also encourage government to make reading competitions on a regular basis. Part of the prize-winning programs for schools, primary schools, secondary schools, tertiary institutions, students should be encouraged. They should have a reading culture, a reading time. Just like you have the break time, we should have a reading, you know. There is something we call drop everything and read. The acronym, DEAR, drop everything and read. Maybe if it's 10 minutes or 15 minutes, every time in every school we say, okay, this period is for reading. Trying to push the population, the students to know reading, and we can make these books available. I happen to belong to the network of book readers and reading promoters. And this is what we do to promote the reading culture across the spectrum of societies. We visit libraries, we donate books to libraries, books cutting across all disciplines. It's not just about science and technology, but we look at books in terms of, in a holistic approach. Science, technology, philosophy, ethics, sociology, economics, international affairs, you know. So it is so important that we begin to catch up with what we have lost and begin to make it as something that we used to have before. Make books available, whether it is new or old. People are collecting old books now. We are book collectors too. And then we send these books to schools, because some of these students may not be able to afford some of these books now. You know, the African Writers series is getting out of extinction. You know, books by Chinua Achebe. Things Fall Apart, No Longer at Ease, Man of the People, and poems. We know we used to read George Orwell. You know?
But these days, the generation that we have now may not seem to like or to fancy such books. Is there a need for the writers to be creative and in their books reflect the time that we're in to make it attractive to read?
Now, writers write from the perspectives of their experience. And there are now innovations in book reading and book writing. There are special writers that write children's books. They tell all those stories to fit or to meet the needs, the desires, and the expectations of the young child. There are so many of those writers now, and we have access to them, and we get these books to meet with the students. So it's not just that the content of the write-ups are complicated or difficult, it's just that the passion, the interest in the book has dwindled. So we encourage teachers, English teachers and teachers all, and even we encourage parents, because when parents read, the children will likely follow suit to read. But if, as a parent, you don't read, they don't see you reading, whether it's for fun or for study or for education, your child might not lose interest. What is paramount is that we must continue to read, and our children should be encouraged to read. And they should also be encouraged to write. We have children poetry sessions, children that write poems. We give them books to read, we ask them to choose. Some might want to read about William Shakespeare, Shakespeare's tragedies, Shakespeare's drama, Macbeth, Othello, and the rest, Midsummer Night Dream. Some might want to read about Elechi Amadi, the great poems, the great Nigerian writers. Some might want to read about Jack Onana's daughter. Some might want to read about Buchi Emecheta. We used to have the Peseta series, short stories well underlined with the plot and the theme to fit with the environment of the young child or the growing teenagers. Those books are going extinct. Our job now is to try to rediscover where we missed it. Like when Achebe wrote that he has written in his book to let us to know where the rain began to beat us. So we begin to retrace our steps and see how we can get our young ones to embrace the reading culture and then be able to make viable and useful contributions to society. Because if you are not reading, if you are not studying, if you are not having contact with books, there is no way you can expand the horizon of your thought and your learning and then make useful contributions to society. In fact, if you are not very good in reading, you may not be able to make academic success in some unique fields of studies, because studying and reading, they go together.
All right. I like the fact that you made reference to the role of parents, which it's very critical. I remember my own experience. The first set of books I was exposed to was handed over to me by my father. But let's look at this trend where there are people who feel the technology has taken over. Do you see hard copy, going out of circulation? And what kind of incentives do you think the federal government can put in place to encourage publishers and even writers?
Now, governments can play a very strategic role in encouraging publishers and writers. One, we must go back to establish our printing press. We used to have the paper industry that was very viral. We used to have the Nigerian newsprint, a manufacturing company. These people used to come up with materials for journalists, for newspapers, for text and materials, but those establishments have gone moribund. That is one. Then Nigeria, the government also can impact or make inputs, partner with the Nigerian Publishers Association. We have the Nigerian Publishers Association. These are people who are publishing books for primary, for secondary, and for tertiary institutions. There are so many of them across the country. Government can partner with them and see how they can secure funds to finance the publishing of key books, selected books for Nigerian children and for our reading. Government can also partner with the Nigerian Booksellers Association. We have the Nigerian Booksellers Association. Every year, these people gather together with the publishers, any good date in May, to run the Nigerian Book Fair, International Book Fair, inviting publishers.
We're out of time on the show today, but we'll find time to look at some of those issues again. As you talked about, reading helps in studying. So let's look at how we study and how school curriculums are structured, if that is also a disincentive to children reading, or if that discourages the reading culture. But we'll look at that at another time. But thank you very much, Ikom Herring, for being part of our show today.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
And as Bennett on Early Exchange, we thank you for being our viewer and listener all through the week. Let's do this again Monday, 8 a.m. West African time. And then we thank you so much. You can leave your comments. The conversation doesn't end on the table here. You can just drop your comments and we'll appreciate that very much. There'll be other programs for you to enjoy on Souq News. 11 o'clock is for Market Insight, known as for Sports, Souq Sports, and then Souq Pulse comes up at 4 p.m. Do enjoy your weekend. I am blessed in AJ. Bye.
Remember, you can do a catch-up on our YouTube channel, on our social media platforms, for you to have a feel of what we talked about today, from the issue of Africa to the reading culture in Nigeria. I am Femi Ayodele. Bye for now.